like to welcome you tonight to this conversation on bipartisanship with Secretary LaHood and our own Steve Edwards, Executive Director of the Institute of Politics. Before we get to the program, we have a couple of exciting events coming up in the next few weeks. David Marinus will be here on November 9th to talk about his new book, The Rise and Fall of the Motor City, about Detroit. Bethany McLean will be here November 18th speaking about the mortgage crisis and her new book, and John Huntsman will be joining us November 30th. Tonight's event is going to be filmed for the IOP's website, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mike Vasiliou, who is a third-year student and the media liaison for College Republicans. He's the president of Maroon Television, and he is from Queensbury, New York, and he will be introducing tonight's program. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if this is working, so I'll just try and be loud, but thank you for the introduction, and I'm honored to introduce tonight's guest, Secretary LaHood. LaHood served in Illinois as Illinois' representative in the House of Representatives for 14 years in the 18th District. In that capacity, he served on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and the House Appropriations Committee. After President Obama's election in 2008, LaHood was nominated to serve as the Transportation Secretary as one of only 2 Republicans in the cabinet. In that position, he served for 4.5 years and worked hard to champion high-speed rail construction, to end distracted driving, and to increase fuel efficiency of automobiles. As a Republican in a Democratic administration, Secretary LaHood has worked across the aisle to improve the lives of everyday Americans. And as a congressman, he's witnessed legislative partisan battles firsthand. His book, Seeking Bipartisanship, My Life in Politics, explores his life as an official willing to work with both parties. LaHood is also a member of the IOP's Board of Advisors. Tonight, the Secretary is joined by the IOP's Executive Director, Steve Edwards, and I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to introduce Secretary LaHood and Steve Edwards tonight.
Thank you, Michael. And I should say that some of you, I'm sure, were expecting David Axelrod to be sitting in this seat tonight, as was he. But unfortunately, as some of you may have read if you saw the papers today, his father-in-law passed away, and so he's unable to be with us tonight. But he wanted to be sure to extend his gratitude to you, Secretary LaHood, and to all of you for being here tonight. And I'm honored to be sitting in this chair with you. I should say, by way of background, I can't think of any single member of our Board of Advisors who has been more responsive, more diligent, more dedicated to the IOP than has Secretary LaHood since the beginning of his involvement with the Institute. And I also think that his career and the subject of this book speak to the values that we're trying to foster here. Values that teach that public service is a noble calling, that there is, while there's great passion and disagreement, and that's a natural and a part of politics that should be encouraged, there's also a place for civility and for conversations where we can bridge those divides. So please join me in giving another round of applause and thanks to you, Secretary LaHood.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so you say early on in the book that you went to the Robert H. Michael School of Applied Politics, Political Arts and Sciences. You consider yourself a graduate of that. What do you mean by that? How important was he to your thinking about politics?
My career started out as being a teacher, and then I got involved in politics as a congressional staffer for 17 years. And I worked for 12 of those 17 years as Bob Michael's district person, and then the last 4 years as his chief of staff. And he became someone who was a mentor for me in the sense that I looked to him as somebody who represented what's good about government, somebody who had the leadership skills to help for 8 years President Reagan and for 4 years President Bush carry out their legislative agenda in a bipartisan way. And I learned an awful lot about public service. I learned an awful lot about helping people. I learned an awful lot about how you can use the office as a congressional staffer to cut through red tape and be helpful to people. And I also watched Bob Michael work very closely with a conservative Republican president in Ronald Reagan, working with a very liberal Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, and they got things done. And so it was just a great learning. The whole experience was a learning experience.
He used to, he was also, if I understand correctly, didn't he ride back and forth from Washington to Chicago, oftentimes with Dan Rostenkowski,
That's correct.
Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee?
Bob Michael was elected in 1956. Rostenkowski was elected 2 years later. They became very good friends. Rostenkowski, a very, very strong Democrat from Chicago, who rose to become chair of the Ways and Means Committee. Bob Michael, a very conservative Republican from Peoria, Illinois, who rose to become the longest-serving Republican leader from Illinois in the U.S. House of Representatives. And they became very good friends. And those were the days when you maybe get paid for one trip back to your district. And so what they would do is they would get in a car together and drive back and forth across country. And their friendship was really forged through that kind of
yeah, I mean, 12, 15 hours in a car or more would do that to you.
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
So what is it about the House of Representatives at that time that allowed those kinds of friendships to form, other than being stuck in a car with a colleague from your home state? What else was going on in the House?
Look, I think what was happening is that people were forging relationships and friendships. If you know somebody in politics, it's very hard to trash somebody or to criticize them. You can disagree with them and you can have different principles, but the way that politics works today, it's this idea of, you know, what's the worst thing you can say about somebody and get away with it, just about anything. And that's typically what's been happening more recently. Back in the day when Michael and Rostenkowski served, there was a high level of respect for the job, for the people holding the jobs, and for their ability to develop the kind of relationships where people really became good friends, strong friends, and they got to know one another's families and spouses and children, and they became like neighbors.
Yeah. Your book, in many respects, charts the unraveling of that culture inside the House of Representatives, and you look at a couple of key turning points in your own career and turning points inside the House. One of those was the election in 1994 of Newt Gingrich, who was then had succeeded Bob Michael as Republican leader, became Speaker of the House. And Republicans obviously took over control of the House for the first time in decades at that point. Why was that so significant? What happened?
It was significant because for the first time that people could remember, Gingrich nationalized the congressional elections. And what I mean by that is, ordinarily you think of a congressional election is like an election for your local congressperson, where they come and talk about the local issues and how they're going to vote on certain bills. You don't think of it as an idea where you're electing somebody to become a national figure. And what Gingrich did, he came up with this, what I called a gimmick, called the Contract with America. 10 items. And these 10 items were going to be voted on within the first 100 days of Republicans taking control of the House of Representatives. And Gingrich went all over the country campaigning on the idea, if you elect Steve to Congress, he will come to Congress having signed the contract with America, and we will do these 10 things that will change the Congress, change the country, and change the way that we do business. So it was a nationalization of congressional campaigns where Newt went to not every district, but a lot of districts and helped Republicans get elected. Boom. On Election Day, Republicans, after 40 years, come into the majority. Newt becomes Speaker, and he becomes a lightning rod because he's very controversial. Democrats didn't like him because he took on their Speaker, Jim Wright, who had to resign from the House, and Tom Foley ultimately became Speaker. So Newt comes in with a lot of baggage from Democrats on the other side. He comes in taking over the House. Republicans have been out in the wilderness for 40 years. Now they're the majority party. Now he's the Speaker. And within the first 100 days, we voted on those 10 items. So there was very vigorous debate about those 10 items. And most Democrats voted against it. I think the key to that election was the nationalization of congressional elections, which people hadn't seen, many people had never seen in the history of a congressional campaign.
Yeah, we still see the seeds of that. That's the playbook today.
It is the playbook
But
today.
you didn't sign the contract with America
I didn't,
as a Republican.
yeah, I mean,
Why?
because I was, my last 4 years of working for Bob Michael, I was chief of staff, which means I served in Washington. And, you know, I knew Newt very well. I knew that he was very ambitious. I had heard all of his lectures and all of his speeches and all of his pronouncements. And I just thought the contract with America was kind of a gimmick. And I was really running in my district on the idea that I wanted to be an advocate for the farmers that I represented, the working people that I represented. In some instances, you know, I looked at my district as I wasn't just representing Republicans. There were Democrats that were going to vote for me. There were independents. And this idea I just thought was a little too gimmicky.
You mentioned lectures. You heard the lectures of, and many people, the younger folks here may not know what you're referring to in specific, but tell me how Newt Gingrich, was able to actually get so much support within the Republican caucus. This is something that he built up over time, but in fairly rapid fashion.
Well, look, Newt was, first of all, very, very smart and very articulate. And when he spoke, you knew that he was not just talking off the top of his head. He did a lot of research, and he knew what he was talking about, and he was very committed to these very conservative ideas, and he was all of these 10 items, if you go back and look at them, if you were to Google Contract with America, what you would see would be a lot of reforms of the House of Representatives that people had been calling for.
And this was also happening in the wake of the broad congressional scandals.
That's right. The bank scandal where members of Congress were writing checks and the money wasn't there. The post office scandal where, you know, they were getting free postage. A lot of the way the House was being run did not really reflect the way that common ordinary people were living their own lives.
And Gingrich would do these, he had cassette tapes he would send out, right?
He did, yeah.
That people who wanted to run for office or others, they would listen to him opine.
Yeah. In a way, he was a political evangelist in a way. I mean, he's a very, very good speaker, very smart. He did his homework. He knew the nerves that he could touch with the American people that would really strike the kind of argument that helped a lot of Republicans get elected.
You talked a little bit about the divisiveness between the two parties because of the baggage. What impact was this having on you within your own caucus at the time? Somebody doesn't sign on to the contract with America, and yet now you're part of the majority led by this guy.
The leaders didn't like that, and I came into Congress probably with more experience than anybody else that was elected in my class. There were I think 73 Republicans and maybe 13 Democrats in that class. Nobody had the kind of experience that I had, 17 years as a congressional staffer. I knew a lot of the members of Congress. I knew how the House worked. I knew the procedures and the rules. But, you know, that really didn't get me very far because not signing the contract with America, the leaders didn't like that. And, you know, I was a little bit of an outcast and a little bit of an outlier. And so, you know, for a few years, I just kind of did my own thing and looked after my district and tried to vote my district. And, you know, in the end, I out-survived Gingrich, Army, and DeLay. I was still standing when they were gone. So, you know, I'm glad for that.
Well, you were also there when the kind of internecine internal battles were taking place among many of those leaders.
That's
and we
right.
think about the efforts on the part of members of the Freedom Caucus now to get Boehner out of power.
Right.
There was a parallel during this era.
There was a parallel.
What happened?
Yeah, Army and DeLay, for some reason, got sideways with Gingrich, and this was probably maybe 6 or 7 years after we'd come in the majority, and they were feeling their oats, and they organized a group of, they weren't called Tea Party Republicans then, but they were people who were a little disenchanted with Newt at the time, and they tried to overthrow him. and was not successful. And in the end, both of those guys ultimately left, and in the end, Newt left, so it was not dissimilar to what we've just seen more recently, where the Tea Party people not only tried, they really pushed Boehner out of the speakership.
If you don't mind, I want to stay with this for just a second, because I'm curious to know, when a move like this, an insurgency is afoot, especially with two people as powerful as they were, DeLay and Dick Armey, what's happening behind the scenes as they are they having private conversations?
Yeah,
are they going door to door to all of the members saying, "Are you with me, Ray?"
No, they have their own little groups, and they get a meeting room, and they meet, and they kind of agree on what they're going to do. And during one of these meetings, somebody said, "Well, if we overthrow Newt, who's going to be speaker?" And DeLay didn't want Armey to be speaker, and Armey didn't want DeLay to be speaker, and so there was a little break in the ranks there. And there's a lot of back and forth, but some of it is one-on-one, but some of it is with different groups.
Right. So you're painting a picture in the mid to latter part of the 90s of an ascendant Republican majority led by an outspoken and divisive character in Speaker Gingrich, who is not only controversial among Democrats, but controversial within his own party, who is nationalizing the election in '94 that brings about his leadership. You talk a lot about this idea of the erosion of civility, so you can see the seeds of that in just those examples. You then try to organize a number of efforts to bring people together. And there are two things I want to know. I want to know what you did, but I also want to know, before you get there, what was the reason for that? What was happening in the day-to-day life among the 435 members that made you think that was necessary?
Yeah, I think Democrats felt like they were, obviously they were out. They were not in the majority, and for the first time in 40 years, many of them had lost their chairmanships. They were the ranking members rather than the chair of these committees, and they didn't like that. They didn't like the way that Gingrich was running the House, and they didn't like listening to his speeches day in and day out. And some Democrats approached me and said, "Hey, what about the idea of let's organize a bipartisan retreat where we get members, everybody would be invited, knowing that a lot of members wouldn't come, but we get Democrats and Republicans to go off for a weekend with their families to get to know one another better." A lot of the Democrats didn't know these new Republicans. Some of the Democrats really didn't know Newt that well, had not really, served with him. And so we did organize a bipartisan retreat at Hershey, Pennsylvania. We thought if we got enough of this sweet chocolate in people that maybe we could convince them to turn around. And we had over 200 members of the House, over 150 spouses, and over 100 kids. And we all gathered in Hershey, Pennsylvania for a weekend, and it gave us a chance to get to know one another. It also gave spouses a chance to get to know another congressional spouse. And for the first time, it gave a congressional kid a chance to meet another congressional kid. And, it turned out pretty well, and relationships began to develop. Now, I'm not saying that one weekend solved all problems, but I think it did lead to some relationship building that over time was a little bit helpful, and the leaders supported it. And as time went on, we continued to do these.
You did 3 more of these?
Yeah, we did 3 more, and the participation went way down.
Why?
Because I think people felt that it wasn't that effective, and people felt that it just really wasn't going to make a difference. And frankly, the leadership changed a little bit, and we couldn't really get the leaders. They went, but they weren't that gung-ho about it.
So what was going on at the time, structurally and otherwise, that made fewer and fewer members think that this was going to change?
I think the fact that maybe they didn't really see any dramatic changes in their ability to do the things that they came to Washington to do, and to vote on the issues that they wanted to vote on, and that there really weren't that many big changes that took place. Yeah. There was some good relationship building, but the structural changes that they were looking for probably were not there.
And the structural changes you're talking about include everything from the House rules, the operation of
Yeah,
how
the
legislation
ability,
moves.
you know, look, if you get elected to Congress, you want to be able to offer an amendment on an idea that you think is a good idea on a bill, or you want to be able to stand up and speak on the House floor. And I think people just felt like, you know, the issues that they cared about were just not, were not on the top of the list of this conservative band of people that were running the House.
What role did fundraising play in this as well, and the pressure to be home in your district more, to be on the phone more?
Yeah. Well, here's the way it works. Members of Congress fly to Washington on Monday or Tuesday, and they're there to vote, but they almost always probably have a fundraiser on Tuesday night or Wednesday night. They finish up on Thursday, and they fly back to their district. So while they're in Washington, they're either maybe running to the floor to vote, or they're in a committee hearing, or they're going to a fundraiser. Fundraising takes up a lot of time for members of Congress. Having the money to run a campaign is a big part of campaigning.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is done in Washington. And a lot of it is done when you think people maybe are going to go out to dinner and socialize, and they end up raising money and spending time with, you know, the PAC community.
Yeah. You got 435
Exactly.
separate fundraisers happening in D.C.
You do, yeah.
Thereabouts.
Yeah.
So the other thing that we haven't talked about are the external events that are, in some cases, throwing gasoline on the mix that you're describing here. And one of those clearly was the impeachment of President Bill Clinton.
Right.
You write about this a lot, and I want to get your inside take on a number of aspects of it. But as it relates to the lack of comity, C-O-M-I-T-I, or
Right.
T-Y rather, what impact does that have on this dynamic that we're describing here? What was going on behind the scenes?
Well, I think that when you look at, when people go back and read the history books, Newt obviously was very smart. Bill Clinton was also very smart. These are two very smart individuals with very strongly held views, and they felt that, you know, I think that they were on opposite ends on a number of things. And certainly the conservative members, the Dick Armeys and the Tom DeLays of the Republican Party, had no use for the idea that Hillary Clinton was trying to push health care for 2 years, and her husband was letting her do it, and that he was pushing other issues that conservative Republicans didn't like. And so you had a battle of two real titans, two very similar people in terms of their intelligence and intellect and communication skills, and but on really opposite poles when it came to issues. And the best example is welfare reform. Clinton vetoed 2 welfare reform bills that the Republican Congress passed, and eventually we came around to some of the ideas he wanted, and he ultimately signed a bill. But that's, you know, that's just a classic example. You know, Clinton, you know, we passed 3 balanced budgets, and, you know, we did it only after we could get Clinton on board, you know, with some of the things that he wanted to get funded. So you just had 2 strong-willed people, and they just clashed every day.
How does that relationship, and I'll come back to impeachment in a second, compare to the relationship that you observed during the Reagan years, not just between Reagan and Tip O'Neill, but the 3 that you mentioned, Bob Michel, and in terms of style, like what was Reagan's approach?
Yeah,
to
the difference is, I think that Tip O'Neill saw himself as the Speaker of the whole House. And the difference between that and Gingrich, who saw himself as Speaker of the Republican Party, or Boehner as Speaker of the Republican Party, or Hastert as Speaker of the Republican Party. When you get elected Speaker, you get elected Speaker of the House, the whole House. But these 3 previous speakers that I mentioned, Boehner, Hastert, Gingrich, they were much more aligned with the Republican Party. Tip O'Neill, he may not have liked your idea, but he let you offer the amendment. He'd let the debate run. And then there'd be a vote, and he'd have the votes to beat back your amendment. but at least you had the chance to have your say, offer your amendment. That was not the case with these other speakers.
Well, it begs the question, what do you foresee in Speaker Ryan's approach?
I don't know. I think that Paul is in for some tough sledding only because the 40 Tea Party members that shut down the government a year ago, the 40 Tea Party members that ran Boehner out of office, the 40 Tea Party members that would not support Paul Ryan unanimously, some of them voted for him for Speaker, are still there. And they're still there with very strongly held philosophical views, very strongly held ideas about how they want to be involved. And Paul is going to have to contend with them. They're not gone.
Let me come back to...
And I can tell you this, they're crowing. If you know what the word crowing means, it means that they're cheering pretty loudly about the fact that Boehner's gone and that they ran him out.
So this is a victory.
That's a big...
This reinforces
That's a
the
big,
tactic.
big feather in their cap.
Yeah.
Those are colloquialisms for Peorians. From Peoria.
I know there'll be other follow-ups about the current House, so I'll let some of you weigh in on that. Let me stay for just a couple of more minutes before I turn the floor over to all of you on some of the pivot points in your larger story and the themes here. So we talked about the impeachment of Bill Clinton. As you look back on it now, what was the low moment there, the lowest moment?
I think the lowest moment really was... What happened was Bob Livingston, Newt had announced he was not going to be Speaker. So Bob Livingston from Louisiana, chair of the Appropriations Committee, a very powerful committee, raised a lot of money and essentially locked up the votes with Republicans to become the next Speaker. So everybody knew he was going to be the Speaker. And once we finished everything up. And on the second day of impeachment, it was a full day of people coming on the floor, doing a lot of talking. On the second day, Livingston is the first speaker that morning, and I'm in the chair. And he immediately announces, I'm not going to stand for Speaker. It was disclosed that he was having an affair with a woman outside of his marriage, and that had been disclosed, and he said, I don't think I can stand as Speaker. And the air went out of the chamber. I mean, no one expected this. And within 6 hours, Tom DeLay and a very small group of people plucked a guy from Illinois named Denny Hastert to become the next Speaker. Now, I say it was a low moment because I think it really showed that, the vulnerabilities of members of Congress, here we are impeaching a president, and now we got another guy who's in the same boat as Gingrich, who couldn't run for Speaker because he had his own infidelities. And so, I don't know, it didn't reflect very well on the House.
Yeah. What ultimately prompted you to decide to not only leave the House, but to join the administration of a newly elected Democratic president and Barack Obama?
Mm-hmm. I served for 17 years as a staffer, and while I did that, I worked for two members of Congress, mostly in Illinois. And what I mean by that is my last 4 years with Bob Michael, I was chief of staff, so I was going back and forth, but I was mostly running around Illinois, doing politics and doing public service and helping people, and I loved it. And then I got elected, and I loved the job, helping people, got a lot of stuff done, a lot of community organizing. We helped establish health clinics. We built 5 Habitat for Humanity homes, and we got involved in our community in areas where we knew it was really going to make a difference for the people in our district. It had nothing to do with our work in Washington. I was on the Intelligence Committee, which most people didn't know, which was good because you're not supposed to be telling people you're on the Intelligence Committee or they'll kick you off.
You were there during 9/11.
I was there during 9/11. I was also a member of the 9/11 committee that studied what happened and put out a report. So my point in saying all of this is after 14 years, I decided that, first of all, I hated to tell people that I didn't want to come to their events or do their events. I have gone to more baptisms, bar mitzvahs, first communions, Eagle Scout ceremonies than all of you in this room will ever go to. And I loved every one of them. But when you get tired of going to parades and tired of going to county fairs and tired of going to barbecues, and you don't really want to tell people no, then you probably should do something else. And that's what I decided. I decided that I thought I did everything that I could possibly do. I thought that my service to the district and to the country had held me in good stead. And so, plus, you know, I believe in this idea of going out on top. I wasn't voted out. I wasn't indicted out, thank God. And I wasn't carried out. I walked out on top, and there's something to be said for that. And I really believe that. These are not lifetime jobs. You do the best you can, and then you move on. My relationship, the way I got the DOT job with President Obama, two people. Obviously the president who offered me the job, who I got to know when he was a U.S. Senator and I was a congressman. We became good friends. We worked together for Illinois. I had never met Barack Obama when he was running for the Senate. 2 days after he got elected to the U.S. Senate, my cell phone rings. I'm in Peoria. Ray, this is Barack Obama. I say, congratulations. He says, I'm coming to Peoria. I want to sit down with you, and I want to work with you as a congressman from Central Illinois and a senator from Illinois. And we did. And we did work together. The other relationship was Ram. Ram and I served together from the Illinois delegation. We became very good friends. We're still very good friends today. He and I, toward the end of both of our careers in the House, used to have dinners where I would invite 7 or 8 Republicans. He'd invite 7 or 8 Democrats. We'd go to a restaurant on Capitol Hill, have dinner, and we formed great relationships just with those people. And we'd invite different people to every dinner, and we did it once a month. And so Ram and I became very good friends, and he and I spoke before President Obama was elected and after, and I consider it a very, very high privilege to have served in what I believe will be the most historic administration in the history of our country when we elected an African American. And for me, who loves public service, wow, what a way to cap my career. And again, 4.5 years, boom. I tell the president I'm leaving, he asks me to stay, and I say I want to go out on top.
And you did. Let's pause here and take your questions. We have questions about anything that we've talked about Congress, about Congressman LaHood's service there, about Secretary LaHood's service at the Department of Transportation, current politics, the relationship between the Obama White House and Capitol Hill, all of those kinds of things. We have 2 microphones that will make their way around, and by a show of hands, we'll get a microphone over to you. So we've got a few in the front here. We've got one over here. So why don't we start up here in the front row? Yeah, with the 2 of you. And if you could stand when you ask the question, if you don't mind.
Hello, Mr. Secretary. My name is Ronald, and I graduated from Bradley University. Your name is
if you can keep the microphone in front of you,
oh,
sir.
Sure. And I'm a teacher in Naperville, Illinois, high school government. And my students wanted to know, with Aaron Schock recently being voted out and your son being voted in, he's very popular down there, what do you say to students that are disenchanted by the number of politicians that do end up being either voted out or indicted out? You know, what can I bring back to my classroom tomorrow to say this is what Secretary LaHood tells the future generation of politicians and public servants?
It's a great question. What you should tell them is that you talk to somebody who's been in public service and political service for 35 years, and 99.9% of the people that I have known in government or served with in government or been involved with in politics are good, decent, honest, hardworking people. And if they don't get involved in politics, then they're missing an opportunity to serve their community. They're missing an opportunity to serve their neighbors. They're missing an opportunity to be a part of either moving the country forward, moving their community forward. That's what public service is about. It's about really doing good things, making progress. And, you know, I've known people that have gotten in trouble. Jesse Jackson was in my class when I got elected in '94. I knew Dan Rostenkowski. I knew Governor Ryan. I knew Rod Blagojevich when he was a congressman from Illinois. His office and my office were right next to one another. But just remember what I said. After 35 years in government and in politics, 99.9% of the people that I've met are good, hardworking, decent people who are in government for the right reasons. To get things done, to make a difference, to help people.
What explains the outlier cases, out of curiosity? What
Well,
happens?
each one is different.
Yeah.
Yeah, each one is different. I mean, you know, all of these individuals that have gotten, you know, far afield of what they were elected to do, you know, each story is different.
Yeah. Let's take another question. Yes, sir.
Mr. Secretary, I'm Miles Zaremski. I'm an attorney and also a professor. I wanted your views on what we see going on in this cycle of the presidential election, because whether it's Democrats or particularly the Republican side, it seems to be dysfunctional. And I mean, name calling or what, I mean, it's nothing new, but it seems like you come from the ranks of compromise that moves things forward, and I don't see that. If you could comment.
Yeah, look, I think that there's a lot of disenchantment with Washington because Washington hasn't done anything. They haven't solved immigration. Now, the House and the Senate have passed a transportation bill, but they haven't solved tax reform. Congress is at 7% because people don't think that Congress is doing anything, and they're not doing much.
7% approval rating.
7% approval rating. And so it allows people like Trump and Ben Carson and Ted Cruz and others, particularly Carson and Trump, who have not really ever been elected to anything and have never really served in government, to be appealing to people who think that an outsider can really get something done. And the truth is, an outsider can't get something done.
An outsider cannot.
Cannot.
Why not?
Absolutely not. Because they're running around trashing the institution that they're running for. Now, you don't know of another occupation. None of you in this room are going to apply for a job and criticize the organization or the job that you're applying for. It only happens in politics. So, when I see people running for Congress, trashing Congress, and then they think they're going to go there and change it, it doesn't work that way. That's stupidity. So for Donald Trump to say everybody's stupid, everybody's wrong, nobody can get it right, he's the only one, he's the savior. Look, a few people believe that, but not many. Now look, the American people almost always get it right. You look back on the rich history of our country, 236 years. And you look at the leaders we've had. Almost all of them have been good leaders. And almost all of them have done good for our country. Some good. Trump's not going to, Trump is not going to get the nomination. And if he did get it, he's not going to be president. He's offended everybody in America.
What explains his staying power, though, thus far, do you think?
Because he's reached his high-level mark, because there are a lot, look at their...
Back to the first part of it, your answer.
Disenchanted people.
Yeah, and so that gets you a base, but also a ceiling.
Yeah, that's it. He's reached it. He's reached it. And, 8 years ago, we have this weird system in Iowa. Anybody can show up at the caucus. You don't have to be registered to vote. You just have to show up. Show up in somebody's kitchen, and you can vote for president. So, what will happen in February, they'll have these caucuses. Anybody can wander into the schoolhouse and cast a vote for whoever they like. And then we go on to New Hampshire and then South Carolina. My point is this. 8 years ago, Huckabee won the Iowa caucuses. 4 years ago, Santorum won the Iowa caucuses. The most conservative people win the caucuses on the Republican side, And the most liberal people win them on the Democratic side. Obama won Iowa 8 years ago. Why? Because they got it organized and they got their people to the caucuses. That's why. And, you know,
And that's where the strength is in each party in terms of organizational
yeah, and it could be that, you know, I don't think Trump is very well organized in Iowa. I think he's starting to get organized. There are a lot of other people that are better organized. Maybe Ben Carson is. But you're going to have a lot of conservative Republicans show up at these caucuses. And you're going to, you know, Hillary's going to be the nominee. Now, in order for Republicans to beat Hillary, they have to have somebody who can get more than just Republican votes. Governor Romney lost because he could only get Republican votes. And Trump is not going to get the women vote. He's not going to get the black vote. He's not going to get the Hispanic vote. So he'll get a few Republicans. And it's a weird system that we have, and there's way too much money involved in it. And but I'll go back to what I said. The American people almost always get it right, particularly on presidential elections. We really do.
So as a follow-up to that, looking at the field on the Republican side right now, who do you think will emerge as the nominee? Or who would you be looking at?
Yeah, I mean, it's as the nominee.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just say this: it's not going to be Trump. It's not going to be Carson. It'll likely be Bush, Kasich. Further on down, maybe Cruz, but I think it's unlikely.
Rubio?
I think Rubio is going to get painted pretty widely here over the next by his Republican opponents as being too young, too inexperienced, and you know, that's what Republicans have been saying about Obama for the last 7 years. So if they've been saying it about Obama and they're going to start to say it about Rubio, that some of it's going to rub off.
But the point is, I mean, all of the names that are now high in the polls are names that you think have peaked and will fade ultimately when we get into the real business of the nomination process.
I think when you get to real primaries like New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, Florida, Illinois, where, you know, real Republicans are going to go to the polls and cast votes and are going to be thinking about the fact that Trump can't get elected, he can't beat Hillary, that Ben Carson can't beat Hillary, then they're going to start thinking about some of these other candidates.
Fascinating. All right, we've got a hand up here, then we'll go back there, and let's bring a microphone over here to this side too. Yeah, I'll try to get to as many of you as possible. My apologies for the follow-ups.
So, Secretary, coming into this country as an international student, I noticed two things. One is that you hate being second to any country and all of stuff. And second, that the transportation infrastructure in this country is much worse than Europe. And I know you worked so hard to change that. But so do you see like LaGuardia Airport is an example of that everyone complains about rightfully. So do you see this transportation bill that is the first step to changing that and catching up? Or do you see that this is just a patch that's not going to solve a lot, that a lot needs to be done? Where do you think that people should start, and will they be able to get it done?
What country are you from?
Turkey.
Australia?
Turkey.
Turkey?
Yes.
Oh. Do you think you're ahead of the U.S.? You think you're number one?
Well, our airports are better, though. I can say that.
Look, everybody's better in infrastructure than America. I'll give you that, okay? I'm asking you if you think you're number one.
No, definitely not.
Oh, yeah, good. Okay, thank you.
Germany, perhaps. Germany, perhaps, number one, not U.S.
I think the transportation bill is very inadequate, and it's inadequate because it's only a 3-year bill. They haven't really funded it. They're just funding just the status quo, and so we're way behind. Our infrastructure is a joke. I use the term America's one big pothole, and it's true. It's true. We haven't taken care of our roads. We have 61,000 bridges that are deficient in America today, right now, that need repair. So, you know, a lot of countries are way ahead of us. when it comes to infrastructure. Turkey's a wonderful country, by the way, and so we're glad to have you here in America, rooting for America to be #1.
All right, let's right here, and then we'll go back there. So, yeah.
Mr. Secretary, I'm curious if you can speak to the effectiveness of procedural measures for reducing partisanship, so things like districting and campaign finance.
Redistricting?
Yeah, districting and finance.
Yeah, I know that people like to blame the whole Tea Party thing on redistricting, but my point is this: if Republicans don't get something done over the next year, and if Republicans nominate a weak candidate for president, I think there's a good chance that Hillary will do very well and that Republicans could lose the majority. Even though these Republicans are in safe districts, there are people in those districts that know that nothing's getting done. And if those people begin to turn out in large numbers, even though you have a safe Republican district, you could lose your seat, particularly if Hillary's doing well, and particularly if there's a wave. That's the thing that I think will turn it. If the American people decide that this Congress just can't come to grips with the idea that they need to get stuff done and solve problems, and Democrats have a good candidate, and I think it'll be Hillary, and there's some kind of a wave, I don't think redistricting will make any difference at that point. And, but it has. You know, these districts have been safe, and they've elected these Tea Party people. But these Tea Party people are totally do-nothing people. And they're proud of it. They're proud they shut down the government. They're proud they ran Boehner out of office. But eventually that's going to catch up with them. People want their elected officials to get things done, to solve problems. But there has to be a little bit of a wave, too, I think.
We're having some issues right now, actually in the neighborhood here with railroads. And I was wondering, while you were Transportation Secretary, did you feel a lot of heat from the railroad lobby? Were they, causing issues, or were they not paying attention to safety?
Have you consulted your alderman?
I've gone past the alderman.
Oh, have you? Yeah, okay. I think the railroads are not, they're not that powerful in Washington, D.C. They have some clout. They just got a system called positive train control extended so they don't have to implement it. That was a pretty significant thing. They showed their clout on that. But they're not the most powerful lobby.
Thank you.
Yeah, you had your hand up?
Hi, my name is Isaac Troncoso. I'm a first year in the college, and I'm wondering that if we can all agree that improved bridges, roads, and rail will have real quantifiable economic results and will result in higher growth, and if we can see this problem so clearly, why aren't we fixing it?
Because we don't have the money. The Highway Trust Fund, which is what built America, the Highway Trust Fund built the interstate system, built the Golden Gate Bridge, the Hoover Dam. It's broke. And it's broke because we haven't raised the gas tax in 20 years. The last time it was raised was 1993. And even Republican presidents, Reagan raised the gas tax, George Herbert Walker Bush raised the gas tax when they were president. You've got people in Congress who don't want to raise taxes. Over the last 2 years, 14 states raised their own gas tax, and not one politician was thrown out of office. So we've been trying to persuade Congress, raise the gas tax 10 cents a gallon, index it to the cost of living, let's get back into the idea that we need a big pot of money. That's what the gas tax does. The fact that it hasn't been raised in 20 years, since 93, the fact that it's broke, we have no leverage to do anything. So this bill that was just passed in the House and the one that was passed in the Senate is very chintzy, because there's not that much money to do anything.
What would it take, on what magnitude, what scale, from a dollar amount standpoint over a particular period of time, to put you on a path to rebuilding and expanding the quality of the
Yeah,
infrastructure?
it would probably take 25 cents a gallon and then index it, but I think we should start with 10.
25-cent increase.
Correct. That would be real money. That would bring in billions of dollars.
And how long would it take at that level?
10 years
10 years.
to get back.
To get
we
your
have
backlog.
We have 61,000 deficient bridges. Yeah. And you know what our roads are like. You all drive them. If we have another brutal winter, they're going to be like gravel.
Hand to the back, and then we'll move up here to you. Yeah.
Given the ideological fractures within the Republican Party and the fact that you have these kind of tenacious junkyard dogs like Jim Jordan, what possibility or what of the Republican Party imploding at some point, or what would prevent that from happening?
Well, I'll go back to what I said before. I think these people that are there that don't really believe in their jobs and don't believe in government and don't really want to do anything, if there was some kind of a national wave election, I think there'll be people in their districts that'll get out and vote that maybe haven't voted because they didn't think they could make any difference, but they see somebody at the top of the ticket that they like, and then they throw out the guy that's been serving them too. I mean, that's happened before, and it could happen again. And it happens when people see their elected leaders doing nothing.
But let me follow up to play devil's advocate, because if we had members of the caucus here associated with the Tea Party, one of the things that we would hear from some of them certainly is, what we want is more limited government. We actually want fundamental reforms. We want to control spending. So it's not that we don't want to do things. I'm projecting the argument coming back here, is that we want government to function very, very differently. Those are two different things. Mm-hmm. And we want to push that agenda forward. What would be your response to that?
My response is that this is the crowd that shut down the government and bragged about it and didn't want the government to open up. This is the crowd that threw the speaker out of his job. So it's more than just those issues, Steve. They want to tip the place upside down. They want to do more than just a few of those things. And the classic case is Boehner used to give them votes on their amendments and allow their amendments to be debated, and then they'd vote against the bills. So, I mean, their purpose is not to make progress, not to make change, but just to be obstructionists.
We had a hand up here, yes. And then a hand here, yeah.
I guess back to the topic of transportation. In order to improve our current infrastructure, which problems would you like to see tackled first by the government?
I think the roads and bridges, they're the most used. Here in Chicago, like many cities, you have 50, 60, 70-year-old transit systems. A lot of them need new tracks. A lot of them need new cars. The Mayor Emanuel has worked very hard to get as many federal dollars as possible to fix up the CTA. But there are a lot of old systems around the country. But number one, roads, number two, bridges, and then transit after that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we have a hand up here and then one back there. In fact, we'll have you get a microphone to this person here. Yeah, we'll go ahead and go to you next. Yeah. And then we'll bring the microphone up here. We'll end with this last question. Yes, go ahead.
My name is Logan Noel, and I'm a first year here at the college. I come from California, which has been working on a high-speed rail system, which a lot of people think is not been sufficient. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on, will the United States ever develop a sophisticated high-speed system in the way that a lot of
I'm a
other
big
countries have?
fan of what's going on in California. When we were at DOT, we invested, Schwarzenegger was there, and now Governor Brown over $4 billion. Governor Brown has taken the lead and now has gotten his assembly to pass millions of dollars. If there's one state in America that could use high-speed rail, it's California. Any of you that have driven there know that the roads are congested. You can't really put any more cars on the roads. And you can't really build any more roads. So a 200-mile-an-hour train from San Francisco to LA to San Diego makes a lot of sense. And I give Governor Brown a lot of credit for standing up to the naysayers who don't believe that it's possible to do it. He's making it happen. Now, there's going to have to be some private investment. It's a $69 billion project. And so it is costly. In Illinois, we have a great corridor between Chicago and St. Louis, which is kind of the lifeline of transportation for college students that go to ISU in Normal, or Western Illinois in Macomb, or Southern Illinois in Carbondale. They use that line a lot. The Northeast Corridor is a great, great rail line. It's not high speed. The true high-speed rail line will be in California. There's one on the books from Las Vegas to Los Angeles, which I think, if it gets the private funding, could have an opportunity to move ahead. So it's not for every place in America, but in certain places where there's a lot of congestion, a lot of cars, get people off the road, the Northeast Corridor, perhaps the middle part of the country, and California.
Let's make this our last question.
Hello. So I saw a story recently about a man who replaced his car with Uber. You know, the demand, and there was an argument that the demand-based service could kind of reduce the number of cars on the road by making it by allowing for more of a sharing of expenses.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on Uber and its ability to reduce?
Look, I think it's a very important part of our whole transportation system. It's a revolutionary way of transporting people around communities. My wife and I used it this morning when we left our apartment in Washington. We took Uber to the National Airport, and so it's. I think it's going to be a big, big part of our transportation system. Can I just say a word about David Axelrod? And I think all of you know this, but you know, the program that you all are involved in, the Institute, is a phenomenal program. And really, the vision that David had to give the students and the community an opportunity to hear from all different points of view, from all different parties, I think is just extraordinary. He and I became friends while we worked together in the administration, and there's certainly nobody that I admire more in politics than David Axelrod. But I think his legacy will be the IOP for what we're all doing here tonight and what you all do day in and day out around the campus. And this is an extraordinary program, and you're almighty lucky to be in this part of the planet to experience the kind of opportunities that you have through IOP. Thank you, Steve.
Well, Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for all you do. So the book is called Seeking Bipartisanship, My Life in Politics. There's much, much more than we barely scratched the surface, also about his own family background, which is fascinating. The book is for sale right out here, and Secretary LaHood will be signing books and happy to chat with some of you as well. So we'll get him back there, and thank you all so much for being here.